Hi, everyone. So, for this week's discussion, we were encouraged to respond to one of two prompts. The first prompt involved the Gestalt approach and comparing this to behaviorism that we discussed last week. For this prompt, we were asked which we believe to be more adequate, and we were encouraged to elaborate on which of the two, like behaviorism or the Gestalt approach, best represents how our field should be viewed or examined. And then the second prompt involved Freud and some of his original work, which is not included in the other systems of psychology. For this prompt, we were encouraged to also discuss which of Freud's ideas we felt were important for psychologists to consider when thinking about human behavior. And we were also asked whether we believe psychoanalysis to be the strongest system of our field. And finally, what we believe is perceived when the general population hears the term psychology. Again, I feel like this week's discussion, we were pretty evenly dispersed amongst the two prompts, and some of the takeaways I had from this discussion are as follows. The Gestalt approach with regards to the scientific method operated pretty differently from the systems we've discussed thus far. Behaviorism was more so focused around the stimulus response, and the Gestalt approach revolved more around 20th century science and physics. A major theme of the Gestalt approach was not only is the whole greater than the sum of its parts, but the whole is completely different than the sum of its parts. And as one peer mentioned this week, it would be more difficult from a Gestalt perspective to infer and understand the characteristics of something with just its individual components, which I thought was an excellent way to describe and summarize the Gestalt approach. Most peers, when elaborating on the Gestalt approach, seem to agree that between behaviorism and Gestalt psychology, one over the other wouldn't be the best representation of our field. And just as it was mentioned in lecture this week, a coming together of the two fields would be the most representative of the field of psychology, and that's kind of quoted to Kohler. And then switching gears here, for the second prompt, Freud, as many of the peers mentioned in this discussion, placed emphasis on the unconscious mind. And Freud also, as one peer mentioned, was one of the first people to really identify and name the defense mechanisms. And she referenced these as regression, projection, and denial. And then she said that a lot of these are still emphasized in the field today. And I thought that was a really great acknowledgement of how Freud has contributed to the field of psychology as we know it. And then several peers in the discussion stated that they believe psychoanalysis to be the strongest system, mainly because it brought about further research and discoveries amongst our field. And I also have to agree with that. And then I also agree with one peer stating that another one of Freud's lasting impacts to the field can be found in how psychology is perceived by the general public. And then she brought up the example of, when she tells people she's majoring in psychology, a common response is, does this mean you're going to psychoanalyze me? And again, I would agree that this is a pretty common perception of the field of psychology, and was again another great nod to how Freud and his ideas of psychoanalysis have influenced the field of psychology in general.